Welcome to the deep dive. We often operate under this assumption that the high-level world of strategy and then the mid-level world of sales and then the, ground-level world of project execution are three totally distinct things.
They really do feel like separate corporate universes, don't they?
Yeah, like silos.
Exactly. You've got the executive in the boardroom setting policy, then you've got the sales team out there securing the revenue, and finally the project managers just delivering the actual tangible stuff.
Right. But when you really look at the DNA of the highest performers in each of those groups, the elite COOs, the top consultative sellers, the most effective project managers, they are not operating in isolation at all.
Not at all. They're all speaking one common language.
And what's that?
Clarity.
Exactly. And the stack of sources you brought to us today is just fantastic because it connects these three worlds perfectly. So our mission today is to show you how that strategic vision, that deep customer understanding, and that flawless execution clarity all depend on a common consultative approach.
Right. It's a huge shift in thinking. It basically says that regardless of your role, you are, in essence, functioning as a consultant.
You are diagnosing before you prescribe.
That's the core of it. We're going to show that consultation isn't just, some external title you hire. It's an operational methodology. It's what you need to drive success from the boardroom to the B2B discovery call, and then all the way through to the final technical implementation.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And we are going to start right at the top, at the strategic apex, with the ultimate driver of internal execution, the Chief Operating Officer.
A COO.
So when we talk about the Chief Operating Officer, we're really defining the overall executor of the organization. And that's a really key distinction, right?
It's a critical one.
Yeah.
The CEO, they set the direction, the strategy, the ultimate vision. But the COO, they're the senior executive responsible for the actual administration of the company's day-to-day operations.
They're the one making sure that vision actually turns into a measurable reality.
Exactly. And according to established business models, they're the operational powerhouse. Normally, they're second in command, reporting directly to the CEO.
And they have to be able to act on the CEO's behalf at a moment's notice, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which means they need this deep institutional knowledge and operational authority. Their fundamental mandate is translating that, often very aspirational strategic vision into rigorous, repeatable operational execution.
And overseeing every single critical internal process along the way.
Everything.
Let's use a really specific example of this CEO-COO interplay because I think it makes the division of labor super clear. So imagine a company is under intense pressure. Market share has dropped, and it's mostly due to quality issues in a flagship product.
Okay, a common scenario.
So the CEO's strategic directive is clear and high level. We have to drastically increase quality control, and we need to launch a new premium product category.
That's the vision. That's the what. Now, the COO takes over for the how.
Exactly. And they don't just, nod and say, okay. They immediately translate that high-level goal into a really complex cross-functional action plan.
So they might go to the manufacturing division and instruct them to recalibrate machinery, maybe implement new defect detection software. That's pure process execution.
Right. And at the same time, they're telling human resources to hire more quality control personnel and adjusting the budget to pay for them. That's resource allocation.
And that new product line, the COO has to oversee the entire rollout, coordinating R&D, production, logistics, marketing, all at the same time.
So they're the generalist who's responsible for the delivery of the result.
Not just the idea. That complexity is probably why that historical Harvard Business Review study noted that there's no single agreed-upon job description for a COO.
The role is just inherently fluid. It's defined less by a specific task list and more by what the CEO doesn't do well.
That's a huge part of it. The COO is so often chosen specifically to complement the sitting CEO's skill set.
So if you have a brilliant founder who's amazing at external communication, fundraising, the big vision stuff.
Yeah, the visionary. But they struggle with internal process management.
That's when you bring in a COO who has decades of practical, on-the-ground operational experience.
Exactly. To achieve that necessary balance.
And it seems like the market is really validating the need for this specialized oversight again. We saw that the percentage of prominent companies, we're talking Fortune 500 and S&P 500 with a dedicated CRO, actually rose back up to 40% in 2022.
Yeah, and that's a pretty significant jump from its low of 32% just 4 years before that, in 2018.
So what does that suggest? that the trend of, rolling all those roles into the CEO just didn't work.
It seems like it proved unsustainable or just inefficient in today's, incredibly complex, high-speed environment. Companies need that focused operational leader.
And we have a pretty good idea of what they're being hired to do.
Oh, yeah. The EMA 2023 report lays out their strategic imperatives crystal clear. The top two priorities for COOs are, number one, by a long shot, driving operational efficiency.
And number two,
Aggressive cost reduction. These are not soft goals. They're mandates for rigorous, measurable performance improvement.
but there's one massive, unavoidable obstacle they're all facing in trying to hit those metrics.
Technology.
Technology, always. Technology-enabled optimization is a huge challenge because you have legacy systems, you have fragmented data, and just the sheer pace of technological change, it often becomes the biggest risk factor.
It absolutely does. The sources all highlight that CEOs have to invest substantially in technology, not just for growth, but often just to maintain effective operations and manage their risk.
And this is where we start to see these distinct archetypes of the COO emerge, which I found fascinating. It really showcases the role's innate consulting nature.
Right. You're not just one kind of executive. You might be hired for one very specific, sometimes even temporary, purpose.
So our sources identified three key types. First, you have the change agent.
A change agent.
They're hired with specific high-stakes goals to solve a particular, known, and often very painful problem.
So like a legacy manufacturing company brings in a COO to overhaul their entire supply chain using some innovative new technology.
Exactly. And because this person is often an outsider, they have limited internal political capital or, historical insight.
Which forces them to rely heavily on creativity, analytical skill, and data-driven consulting frameworks to get solutions implemented fast.
Okay, so that's one. Then you have the mentor COO.
Mentor. This role is much more focused on guidance and development. They're often former CEOs themselves or just deeply experienced executives.
And they're brought in when the sitting CEO is, young or new to the role?
Yeah, or maybe leading a company through a period of really rapid, complex growth. Their primary function is to stabilize the executive team, provide guidance, and really help the CEO grow their own leadership capabilities.
The mentor is the one who stabilizes the bridge between the executive vision and the employee execution.
Perfect way to put it.
And finally, there's the hybrid COO.
The hybrid. This is often an internal employee, maybe a highly successful divisional president who gets awarded the title.
So this is less about fixing a crisis.
And more about strategic retention or explicit succession planning. They're being tested. They're often given a specific P&L to oversee or a massive new initiative to prepare them to eventually take over the CEO role.
It's an executive training ground.
Exactly. And their consultative skills are used to build consensus and drive internal alignment before they take that top job. But regardless of their specific mission, the core skill set is this deep blend of strategy and management that just screams internal consultant.
Okay, so let's break that down. First, they need financial acumen and budgeting.
Non-negotiable. They have
Wow.
to apply a broad understanding of financial principles, not just to, read a P&L statement, but to make sure that every single operational decision is fiscally sound.
Constantly balancing operational excellence against the costs.
And dynamically adjusting fund allocation based on real-time progress.
Huh.
It's a constant juggling act.
Okay, second skill.
Operational expertise and problem solving. This is the core execution skill. It means monitoring operations, setting contingency plans, minimizing small issues before they blow up into crises.
Resolving setbacks quickly and using pattern recognition to predict future problems.
Exactly. And third, what is basically a prerequisite for any modern leader? Data analysis.
They have to be able to interpret complex data sets, going way beyond simple spreadsheets.
To forecast outcomes, identify subtle trends in performance, and drive process optimization based on purely data-driven decisions. Gut feeling isn't enough anymore.
And fourth, the ultimate soft skill that makes it all work: leadership and communication.
This is huge. They have to inspire teams at all levels, not just the VPs who report to them, and they have to communicate effectively verbally and in writing, with clients, with senior management, with the CEO, and with the employees on the floor.
It's a true 360-degree communication requirement.
It really is.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the complexity of the COO role is that they are that critical bridge between the employees and the executive team.
Right.
They need that objective analytical insight you find in consulting because they are constantly diagnosing systemic business problems.
Hmm.
They aren't just executing policy, they are executing change based on structured analysis.
Just like an external firm would, but with internal authority.
Exactly.
So the COO is the executive who's responsible for organizational clarity. Now let's pivot from that internal clarity to external clarity and see how this exact same consultative philosophy drives success on the front lines in high-stakes B2B sales.
A perfect transition.
So consultative selling, it's been the dominant idea for decades, but it feels like its definition keeps evolving.
It does. Our sources define the modern approach as one where the seller fundamentally transforms their role to become a helpful guide.
A helpful guide. I like that.
The entire sales cycle centers on deeply understanding the buyer's reality and then positioning their offering not as a product.
But as the solution.
The solution to those specific validated needs, it moves way beyond just product knowledge into a genuine partnership. And it's built on three core pillars.
Okay, what are they?
First, authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Genuine interest in the customer's long-term success is, it's not a nicety anymore, it's a prerequisite.
Buyers can spot a fake a mile away.
Immediately.
Uh,
And it just kills trust. Second is expertise. The prospect has to see you as a trusted expert, not just in your product, but in their industry and their specific challenges.
You have to be able to speak the language of that COO we were just talking about. You have to talk about ROI, efficiency, risk reduction.
Absolutely. And third, context. This is so vital for modern consultative relationships. You can't be a helpful guide if you forget everything that happened in the last conversation.
Right, you can't start from scratch every time.
No. The sources really emphasize the reliance on a communication-focused CRM that retains the full granular history of the relationship. It lets the seller pick up the conversation exactly where they left off, which demonstrates immediate, detailed understanding.
And this emphasis on context brings us to this critical shift in the modern buyer-seller dynamic. I mean, today's B2B buyer is autonomous, they're digitally empowered, they're highly informed.
They're doing massive amounts of research, reading analyst reports, checking competitor reviews, talking to peers, long before they ever engage with a seller. They know their symptoms.
It's like the WebMD analogy you mentioned.
Exactly. The buyer has already checked WebMD. They have a pretty good idea of what they think the diagnosis is before they even walk into the doctor's office.
And this is where that old model of aggressive, seller-driven diagnosis starts to completely fall apart.
It does. We saw an absolutely fascinating insight from a major study of over 700 B2B purchases. The factor deepened my understanding of my needs was near the bottom of winning factors. It was 40th on the list.
Okay, wait, that's really counterintuitive. I would have thought that was the whole point of consultative selling.
Me too, when I first read it. It's shocking to a lot of traditional sales leaders. But here's the critical other half of that data. Understood my needs was the fifth largest gap between the sales winners and the second-place finishers.
Okay, I want to unpack that. If deepened my understanding is ranked so low, does that mean the buyer doesn't want the seller to challenge their assumptions? Or are they just so far along in their own research that they're resistant to being diagnosed from square one?
It's the latter.
Yeah.
And it's a critical distinction. The source material suggests the buyer is often just tired of the basic diagnostic questions. They feel like they've already defined their problem.
So if a seller comes in and starts from zero, the buyer is thinking,
You don't respect my time or the research I've already done. The key to winning, therefore, is not to try and deepen the understanding the buyer has of themselves, but to demonstrably and quickly validate that you, the seller, understand the complexity of the reality they're facing.
and the winners do that more.
The winners spend 2.5 times more time on demonstrating that validation and empathy.
Wow, that completely reframes the entire discovery process. It shifts the seller's focus from, so what's your problem, to, I see you have this problem, let me show you how deeply I understand the implications of that problem.
Exactly. And once that foundation of understanding is established, the seller stops being just a vendor and starts acting like a true strategy consultant for the client.
Which brings us to the Peter Block analogy.
Right. The difference between the collaborator and the pair of hands.
Okay, so the pair of hands is the order taker.
That's it. They execute the need exactly as it's presented by the client. If the client says, I need a blue widget, the paired hands builds a blue widget.
Even if a red one would solve the actual operational issue more effectively.
Yep. They don't redefine the client's reality, they just execute the perceived need.
But the effective consultant, the collaborator, is fundamentally different.
Completely. They define the problem alongside the client. They bring this diverse experience from dealing with hundreds of similar issues in other companies. They provide fresh perspectives, and they are absolutely willing to push back and redefine the client's reality to get a better outcome.
Just like a COO would when analyzing a systemic failure internally.
It's the same mindset. And the collaborator achieves this reality redefinition in two really practical ways. First, they give advice.
This is the evangelical part of the job.
It is, sharing crucial insights on where the industry is heading, emerging tech trends that are relevant to the client, and how they can proactively take advantage.
Yeah.
It's about future-proofing the client's decision.
And second,
And this is the most critical part. They question the status quo. They push back firmly, but respectfully on current thinking. They challenge established paradigms using rigorous analysis and critical thinking.
that's what generates those genuine aha moments for the client.
It is, but it requires the seller to bring genuine domain expertise, not just a product brochure.
And this all loops back to that foundational principle, the diagnostic mindset, the doctor analogy.
You must diagnose before you prescribe. If you start pitching features before you've thoroughly understood and validated the pain, you're just practicing ineffective sales. And as the sources suggest, you're practicing increasingly non-competitive sales.
Okay, so let's move from the philosophy into the practical application, especially in the B2B SaaS world where deals are complex and everything is measured by ROI.
Right. And the sources confirm that the era of relying on just one rigid sales framework is long gone.
Because the buyer is so autonomous and informed now.
Exactly. The modern sales professional has to be adaptive. They have to be a hybrid. They told researchers that they use consultative selling as their baseline philosophy all the time, but they layer in these specialized frameworks as tactical tools depending on the situation.
Okay, so let's walk through a scenario. They might use the classic Espinal framework, that situation, problem, implication, need, payoff, during an initial discovery call.
Right. To really uncover the depth of the pain and help the buyer visualize that positive outcome.
But then once discovery is done, let's say the buyer is moving toward a self-diagnosed solution that the seller knows is not the best one.
Then they might pivot to the challenger methodology. They push back, they challenge the customer's assumptions, and they use disruptive insights to reframe the problem, guiding the client toward a solution they hadn't even considered.
That's the seller acting as that collaborator who redefines reality.
Exactly. And then if the deal moves into the really complex, high-value enterprise phase, they might pull out MEDIC.
MEDIC. So that's metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, identify pain, and champion.
Yep. They use that framework specifically to qualify the deal, to make sure they know who signs the check, what metrics the solution has to move, and what the formal buying process looks like. You can't move forward without that level of clarity.
And beyond these structured frameworks, there are modern tactics that are essential.
Multi-threading is a huge one, connecting with multiple stakeholders within the buying organization.
So you're not reliant on a single point of contact who might leave or lose influence.
Exactly. It mitigates that risk. Then there's social selling, which means starting the engagement on platforms like LinkedIn by offering valuable non-pitchy content or just commenting meaningfully on the prospect's industry.
It's about building trust and showing your expertise before you ever ask for a meeting.
And maybe the most consultative tactic of all is curating roundtables and workshops. These are interactive sessions focused on shared industry pain points and best practices. They're inherently less about pitching a product.
And more about establishing the seller as a subject matter expert and a trusted guide.
And all of this, every single bit of it, hinges on mastering the conversation, particularly deep listening during discovery.
A core principle highlighted across the board was the absolute necessity of listening. I mean, it sounds so simple.
It does, but it's hard in practice. The seller has to take time to relax before the call, to actually shut up when the prospect is speaking, and to never, ever multitask.
Multitasking just kills the trust that consultation requires.
It's a trust killer. And a really critical technique to prove you're actually listening is to repeat back what the customer said, maybe as a clarifying question, just to confirm your understanding.
It forces accuracy on your part, and it shows respect for the buyer's context.
Absolutely. And when it comes to crafting discovery questions, the key is to avoid simple yes or no answers. You want to move the prospect into a detailed, open discussion.
And we saw several themes of impactful questions that are designed to move the deal forward by generating that clarity.
Right. First, you have questions designed to uncover pain and the status quo. These are your diagnostic probes. Things like, help me understand why that process works the way it currently does.
For one I really liked, What's one thing you would never want to see changed?
That's a great one. It reveals those deep-seated political or cultural constraints that you absolutely have to respect.
Okay, second theme. Questions focus on managing change and risk.
This is where you preempt objections. You ask, what concerns do you have about making a change of this magnitude?
And that forces the client to surface their anxieties early on.
Right, which lets you address them consultatively instead of having to react to them when you're at the contract stage.
Third, questions that drive value and measurable results.
This connects the solution directly to those executive mandates we talked about with the COO. You ask, what's the main metric your team uses to track success? And then you follow up with, if you found the right solution, what would be the effect on that specific metric?
That gives you the data points for the business case.
Exactly. And finally, you have vision questions. If we could implement that change, what would that enable you to do or achieve in the next 2 years?
That gets them thinking about the positive future possibilities, which reinforces the need to act now.
It really is all about providing guidance and a clear path forward. As one sales executive in the sources noted, the best salespeople are deeply empathetic. They can step into someone else's perspective, use questions to get a thorough understanding of the challenge, and most importantly, provide a tangible, measurable path for execution.
Now let's bring in the operational side again. Technology isn't just an efficiency tool here, it's a clarity tool. We saw a huge emphasis on sales and marketing alignment, or smarketing.
Smarketing integration, usually through a marketing automation platform that's integrated with the CRM, is a total game changer.
Why? Because it breaks down the traditional departmental silos.
It forces them to break down. When the sales team can see the detailed lead engagement history, what white papers they downloaded, what pages they visited on the website, they gain this shared context.
So sales can tailor their approach, they can skip the basic questions, and personalize their support much more effectively.
Right. It dramatically increases the quality of the consultative conversation from the very first minute.
And of course, we have to talk about AI. It's accelerated efficiency, but it comes with a warning.
A big one. We heard how automation tools can help a seller generate, say, 50 personalized outreach emails in the time it used to take to do 5. That saves a ton of time on repetitive tasks.
Which frees up the human to focus on the high-value interactions.
But the crucial human warning we kept seeing was, while efficiency tools are essential, conversations close deals. The human element is what builds the trust required for consultation.
And I think this was the most important point. AI won't fix your problem if you're automating bad decisions.
So true. If your underlying strategy is flawed, AI just lets you implement that flaw 50 times faster. The quality logic still has to come from the human consultant.
Which brings us back to the COO's mandate, efficiency and measurable results. The consultative seller needs KPIs that track not just the revenue outcome, but the efficiency of their process.
And that process has to align with the overall operational goals of the company. So we measure success using a blended scorecard. First, you have the obvious revenue-focused metrics: win rate improvement, average deal size, and customer lifetime value, or CLV.
Right. And second, you have the efficiency-focused metrics, which linked directly to the COO's world. This includes something like deal velocity.
Deal velocity, just measuring the time it takes from qualification to close. We saw examples of coaching programs that accelerated the average closure time from 60 days down to 45 days. That's a direct improvement to organizational efficiency.
Things like sales cycle reduction and time to first sale for new hires also fall in there.
Yep. Then, third, you have behavioral indicators. These track if the consultative process is actually being used. We look at pipeline movement. Are there fewer stuck deals? Call-to-meeting conversion rates, and even coaching participation rate.
If the seller is actively participating in coaching, it's a sign they're trying to adapt and improve.
Exactly. And finally, customer metrics. Things like the Net Promoter Score, or NPS, or just general customer satisfaction scores. They gauge the quality of the interaction. Did the consultation actually leave the customer satisfied?
You can really see now how the consultative seller's goal-delivering quantifiable value and improving deal velocity maps perfectly to the COO's mandate of driving operational excellence.
Both roles have to define their problem, quantify the potential solution, and execute a strategy based on deep analysis.
So now that we've quantified the value, we have to ensure the delivery. And that transition takes us from the sales promise to the execution framework.
The structured approach that project managers need to achieve clarity and deliver that measurable change.
So when you're implementing any major change, whether it's launching a new product line, which is the COO's mandate,
Hmm.
or rolling out a new software platform, PM's domain, you need structure. You can't just wing it.
No, absolutely not. And this is where the business analysis process framework provides that essential clarity. It's an 8-step guide for turning these ambiguous needs into defined, executable requirements,
And it's so crucial because it ensures that rigor. It prevents teams from just jumping straight to implementation without that foundational understanding.
which is the classic definition of project failure.
Right. So phase one, foundation and objectives. This starts with step one, get oriented.
And this step is deeply consultative. You have to understand your role, identify your primary stakeholders, review the project's history, and map out all the existing systems and processes. You're essentially doing a mini diagnosis of the project environment itself.
And a core part of this orientation, which I think is often overlooked, is establishing a shared vocabulary.
So important. If different departments use the same word like user to mean customer, applicant, and internal employee,
Yeah.
you are setting yourself up for disaster.
You have to create a glossary. Defining your terms clearly eliminates ambiguity, and ambiguity is the enemy of efficient execution.
So once you're oriented, you move to step 2, discover primary business objectives.
And the key here is that the objectives have to be measurable. They have to be tied to desired outcomes, ROI, KPIs. If an objective isn't quantifiable, you can't manage the execution.
Right. We saw a great example for a mobile insurance app. The objective wasn't make the app better. It was reduce average claim agent prep time from 8 hours to 6 or less.
And reduce homeowner and contractor follow-up calls by 50%. Those are efficiency metrics a COO would sign off on in a second.
Instantly. So once those measurable objectives are set, we enter phase 2, defining scope. This is step 3.
This ensures everyone knows the exact boundaries of the solution. It involves defining the solution approach, drafting a formal scope statement, prioritizing the requirements,
And reconfirming the business case. If something isn't in scope, the project team does not touch it, period.
and a key visual tool here is the system context diagram.
Yes, this diagram is so helpful for visualizing the scope. It shows how the new system, the thing you're building, interfaces and passes data with all the existing external systems like the accounting system, the HR database, the email server,
It clarifies all those external dependencies and integration points.
which are so often the hidden causes of project risk and delays.
Okay, so now we move into the heavy lifting of execution, phase 3. Requirements elicitation. This is step 4.
Elicit requirements. This involves interviewing stakeholders, conducting detailed requirements workshops, and sometimes even observing users performing the task in their current environment. Elicitation is the process of getting the information out of the stakeholders' heads and onto paper.
But the pitfall here is just accepting what the stakeholder says they want versus what they actually need, right?
That's the core challenge. The consultative business analyst or project manager has to probe deeply, asking why, multiple times to uncover the underlying business need.
Which leads directly to step 5, document and model requirements.
Once you've elicited them, the requirements have to be formally written down. This usually involves creating artifacts like user stories.
Like, as a customer, I want to be able to upload a photo of my damaged roof so that my claim is processed faster.
Perfect example. Or use cases or detailed process flowcharts. Documentation is what transforms that raw information into a structured, unambiguous plan.
And following that is step 6, communicate requirements.
This is so crucial. It's not enough to just write it down. You have to ensure everyone understands and agrees. This involves formal review meetings, walking stakeholders through the models, and requiring formal sign-offs.
So communication here means making sure the business stakeholders, the technical experts, and the project manager all share the exact same understanding of what's being built.
They have to be on the same page. Then we enter phase 4, design and transition. This is step 7, design the solution.
This is where you translate the documented business requirements into technical specifications that the development team can actually use.
Right. It moves from what the user needs to achieve to how the system must function to achieve it. The output here would be things like interface designs, database schemas, and data migration plans.
And finally, step 8, testing, training, and post-implementation support.
The ultimate clarity test. Testing ensures the solution actually meets the requirements you defined way back in step 5. Training ensures the users know how to use the new process, and post-implementation support guarantees operational stability.
This whole 8-step process just guarantees that the execution follows the strategy set by the COO and the value propositions sold by the consultative seller. It connects everything.
And speaking of execution, once the plan is clear, accountability has to be crystal clear.
Yes.
In any cross-functional operational change, you absolutely have to assign clear ownership. And for that, the SCI framework is a simple but incredibly effective tool.
RCI, so that stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
And it's designed to prevent that internal confusion that causes projects to stall, usually because everyone thought someone else was doing the work.
Okay, let's break it down. R is for responsible.
That's the person or people who actually do the work to complete the task.
And A is for accountable. This is the big one.
This is the most important one. This is the person who ultimately owns the decision and approves the completed work. And the golden rule of RCI, which is essential for execution clarity, is that every single task must have exactly one accountable owner.
If two people are accountable,
Then no one is.
right, then you have C for consulted.
These are the experts whose opinion and input matter. They require a two-way conversation before the decision is finalized. So, for instance, the legal department has to be consulted before you implement a new customer agreement.
Makes sense. And finally, I forward, informed.
These are the stakeholders who just need to stay in the loop. They only require one-way communication, like a status email or read-only access to the project plan. They don't need to slow down the decision-making process.
So when should you map out a RCI chart?
During the planning stage, not when things are already on fire. It's especially useful when decision-making is causing unacceptable delays or when you're onboarding new team members into complex processes.
But the sources did warn about a pitfall here, right?
Oh yeah, consulted creep. Avoid the temptation to add long lists of people to the consulted category for every task. It just guarantees bottlenecks and analysis paralysis.
Okay, so moving beyond role clarity, project managers have to master planning and proactive risk management to ensure that operational predictability that the COO so desperately needs.
Absolutely. And the sources highlighted some common planning mistakes. One major flaw is over-optimistic scheduling.
That's when the PM creates a schedule just to impress the client or senior leadership, knowing full well it's not feasible.
And it immediately results in stressed-out teams, dropping quality standards, and inevitable project slippage. Scheduling has to be a collaborative effort. It has to incorporate realistic team time estimates and to manage client expectations at the same time to get to an achievable compromise.
Another common flaw is a lack of detail in the plan.
Yes, a project plan is so much more than just a timeline or Gantt chart. It has to be a comprehensive route planner detailing the specifications of the project, the budget, the quality metrics, and the assignment of resources for each task, probably according to that RACI model.
Insufficient detail just leaves teams confused and prevents any clear measurement of success.
Which is why risk management has to be proactive, not reactive. Acting reactively, what executives often call management by crisis, just leaves the entire project vulnerable to failure.
Proactive risk management is that continuous process of identifying, analyzing, and developing response strategies to risk factors throughout the entire project lifecycle.
And for the COO, this predictability is everything. They need to know that if risk A happens, the PM has already developed mitigation strategy X and budgeted for contingency Y. That clarity creates stability across the whole organization.
Yeah. But here's the paradox that we have to accept. Despite all the planning, all the ACI charts, all the BA framework steps, there is a mandate for flexibility.
There has to be. Functionality changes daily. A key stakeholder misses a critical sign-off meeting, an employee is out sick, or the CEO issues a sudden change in strategic direction.
So if the project manager is overly rigid,
The project is unlikely to ever see completion because they'll just constantly be fighting against necessary changes. Flexibility and adaptability are intrinsic to execution success.
so you need the clarity of the map, the BA plan, but you also need the agility of the compass adaptability to adjust when the terrain shifts under your feet.
That's the perfect analogy for it.
This has been a fascinating deep dive, really connecting the strategic demands of the COO, the psychological leverage of the consultative seller, and the structured execution of the project manager. It proves that at every level, operational success is directly correlated to the clarity created by this single, shared consultative approach.
It really does. We saw how the COO's job is fundamentally that of an internal consultant, relying on that objective analytical insight to define operational problems, efficiency, cost, risk, and then mandating change based on those findings.
And on the customer-facing side, The best sellers are no longer just diagnosing the problem the client has already researched. They're acting as collaborators, demonstrating deep understanding, and using frameworks like Challenger to push back and redefine the client's reality to drive a superior, measurable outcome.
And finally, that clarity translates into execution, using structured frameworks like the 8-step business analysis process to move from ambiguity to defined requirements, and essential tools like RCI to ensure that accountability is clear and risks are managed proactively.
And the constant need for learning and adaptation.
That's the final crucial link. From the B2B SaaS seller, updating their hybrid methodology to the project manager building in time for continuous risk assessment, that need to learn and adapt is what binds all these roles together.
So what does this all mean? The most successful executives, sellers, and managers today are the ones who have mastered that consultative process. They don't just solve the problem that's presented to them, they have the analytical depth and the confidence to challenge the existing reality, quantify a better outcome, and then execute the plan to get there.
And we've seen that the best consultative approach involves not just accepting the customer's presented problem, but pushing back to define a better reality. So given the operational and sales goals we've covered, efficiency, clarity, and measurable results, what is one status quo in your business, or maybe in your own career, that you need to challenge, not just fix?